Anthony, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Nick. Loud and clear.
Amazing, amazing. Well, if you're watching this, welcome to the first Failing Forward edition of the Not Another CEO podcast. And I like to think of this as the version of the show that's for the rest of us, right? It examines the journeys of those like me who gloriously fought but maybe lost. We hear the lessons of those of us who had the guts to start something, and the outcome was maybe not what they expected. And so, with that, I'm just honored to introduce you today to our first guest. He's a software engineer and a seasoned engineering leader. He's a two-time founding engineer and a three-time technical founder. He has amazing experience bridging startups, enterprise companies, and academia. He graduated from Carnegie Mellon, where he later researched and taught cloud computing and distributed systems in the master's program. He's worked at enterprise companies, most notably Capital One, on their CreditWise credit monitoring app. He was a senior software engineer at Algorithma. He was the founding engineer at Gridwise, which was a rideshare analytics platform, and Galileo, which is a San Francisco-based startup that's focused on improving AI and machine learning workflows. He's a prolific contributor to open source projects and was the founder of the project Astrobase, among, I'm sure, many others that I'm probably butchering because I'm not a technical founder myself. And if all of that was not enough, he's also the former founder and CEO of Casa.dev, which was a startup aimed at improving how engineering and product teams could work together. This person I truly appreciate. He's a truly gutsy founder. He's someone who publicly speaks about and shares his stories of both triumph and failure. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased and humbled to introduce you to Anthony Corletti, the former founder and CEO of Casa. Anthony,
Thanks,
welcome.
Nick. Thank you, Nick. That was an incredible intro.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
having me
Thank you.
on.
Of course. Thanks you for so much for joining. And I it's awesome to have you. I've been doing, I've done versions of this show to talk about the failure of my own company or the shutdown of my own company and the story of what happened. And and it's always been in my mind and one of my goals to start to have others share their stories as well. And so I'm just like so stoked to have you join and to do this together. And so there's a
Yeah.
lot that I think we can talk about today, and a million ways or places or directions will take the conversation. But I think maybe just to start, like you spent so much of your career in like the earliest stages, starting new projects, starting new companies. Like what is it about the early stages that inspires you? Like why do you spend so much time there?
Yeah, Nick, totally. And I really love what you're doing with this. I think that a lot of founders should share more about like things that have gone well, things that haven't gone well. Like sharing your experience is like one of the most valuable things you can do as a founder. And I think getting to the point of like why I've been spending so much time in the early stage, early on in my career, I was spending a lot of time just kind of like at Capital One and then teaching. And I was kind of considering, do I go back to school and do like a master's or a PhD, or do I kind of go into startup world, like
Yeah.
just experience something new? And at my first startup where I was a founding engineer at Gridwise, what really connected for me was every time I got into an Uber or a Lyft, it was like a sales pitch. Like my user was the driver, and I was trying to understand exactly like how they were trying to optimize their time on the road or not. Or like where were they logging their mileage? Like where were they logging their expenses? And then I could say, okay, cool. I've gotten into the mind of this person, into this like persona. Now I'm gonna go home and like build some stuff and like reach out to them and see if they like using it. And since then, like that's just been a flywheel for me.
Amazing. I mean, I think one of the coolest things for like you, I think, or for like any like truly technical founder, which like I'm not, is how fast that feedback loop can be, right? Like you can like you're also a product person, like you can have that conversation with that Uber or Lyft driver contextualize it, get inside that person's like job or day or persona, and then like immediately go action that. And the speed by which someone with your background can do that is is so cool. To me, it's so cool. But for someone like yourself, I also imagine it's just like super rewarding as well.
Yeah. There was a moment when, like, coming back to Gridwise, where my friends and I were like going out. We were in the car, and I was like, "Guys, sorry, I gotta do a pitch. I gotta see like what this guy, how he thinks about driving on the road." And as we were going out, he was actually using Gridwise, and he was telling me like, "Oh, you know, Gridwise really helps me identify like how I can go to the airport or whether it's not going, because like that's a very expensive, or could be a very expensive ride out. I burn my time, or I could make like $100 like really easy if I time it right." And he said how like this is what he uses to pay for his daughter's ballet lessons. And I was just like, oh, like this is like incredible. Like I need to keep doing this. Like I need to keep doing this. So that kind of stuff really is like such a magnet, like super high reward, I think.
Amazing. I mean, you're kind of talking about it, but like, what is it that drives you, right? Like, what drives you as a founder, as a technical founder? Like, why do you do what you do?
Yeah, I think like as a technical founder, I find myself more often than not thinking about like if something scales really well, um, then it, like that change that you've maybe affected in like that one rideshare driver or like this one musical artist, you could do for many people. And that's kind of like the responsibility that I really feel like good about taking. Like that's the responsibility I want to take. Like making sure that the product is like spot on, it's solving the problem for the people, and I can build that thing. I can build it. I can ship it. Like I can. There's always something new to learn as well. Like there's so much to learn about different user personas, like going into different kinds of research. And today, like software is really becoming like commoditized. Like there's so many great things you can use and try to do things better and faster than before. So I love it because I also just love learning. I always like try to think like it's always day one, like there's always something new to learn. Like how can you take all of your experiences building things from the past and iterate on those today? So if you grow a team of other engineers, they're like, "Whoa, this is so cool. I can build stuff so quickly." And you can see how fast they accelerate as well into doing something similar. That for me is just like something I absolutely love to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me and what you said, with what the core of what you said, it just that continuous learning mindset, it just that
Yeah.
resonates with me as well. And I'm someone who has always embraced that, and like what gets me going is always learning something new and doing something new. And I mean, there are many attributes of founders and technical founders, but that's certainly one that you and I share in common.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, there's so much we want to cover today, but let's spend a few minutes just like talking about Casa, right? Like you know, you had the confidence, you had the guts to go out and start something. Like what was that light bulb moment for you, right? Like what was that moment that said, "Hey, I have to go and do this."
Yeah. There was a lot of conviction in this moment, and that's how I knew. That's when I felt it. So Casa didn't quite start out as a home for engineering context. It started out as actually like a platform as a service for machine learning teams, like better ways to run code in the cloud. How can you do that in a way that's like totally reimagined? It's super fast and performant. And as I was like experimenting, like looking out on the market, I'd already like landed on like a couple of solutions out there. I was like, this is really good already. I'm just going to use those. Like, I don't want to compete, because if I do, I know I'm going to have to like 10x. Like, this is like, I don't just want to jump into the pool there. And so then I was kind of thinking about like, all right, what do I do next? And one day I was listening to like a podcast where the late founder of of LVMH, Virgil Abloh, was talking about this analogy he uses in design and education, where if you take like a candle that's dented, and if you put that candle in a garage, someone might throw the candle away because it looks like trash. But if you take the candle and you put it in a gallery space, then it becomes art. And I was kind of like,
Hmm.
oh, like, what's that for software? Like, how? Because an engineer might do some work in a garage, right? Like that's how it starts. Like Silicon Valley, like I'm in my garage building
Your
things in my
parents'
team.
garage, right?
But
Yeah.
it's like, what does it look like when you take that and you actually put it in a gallery space? And I was like, oh, for spending all this time in GitHub, and then I was kind of connecting dots where it's like, if you think about all the software services you sign up for as a team, right? Like everybody's in Google Workspace, there's people in Figma, in Jira, etc. But then in GitHub, it's like, poof, there's only the engineers. And it's like, where did everybody go? What if we could bring everybody into this space? And that was when it connected with a moment that I was thinking was super important to me. Originally, I wanted to become a software engineer when I heard this talk from an early engineer at GitHub, where he was talking about how GitHub uses GitHub to build GitHub. And I was like, yes, like I love this dog fooding mindset. This is so incredible. And that's kind of when it all clicked. Like that connected with a moment that was like a long time ago. And I was like, I want to kind of reimagine like where our code sits and how our code interacts with other things we work with, like our documents. Should it interact with Figma? And like my brain just started going. And I'm like, this is something I can take a stab at. This is something I'm really curious to start doing research on. Yeah.
I love that concept of, or that framework of just the context that something resides in like changes its nature.
Yeah.
And I could totally see why that would be so fascinating and transformational, like for code. You said something else that's really interesting to me about dog fooding. Like, and in some capacity, like there was a dog fooding nature for you at Casa. Like,
Mm-hmm.
generalizing is like always a fraud exercise, but like for technical founders, do you feel like that's where a lot of these products and projects start, is kind of like eating your own dog food and then getting enough passion to start a company around it? Like, do you think there's anything there?
It's so prevalent in dev tools. It's so prevalent because as an engineer, you want to make the best tools for you. And if you kind of iterate on that really, really well, it could land with other people. Where I think there's a really interesting challenge for dog fooding is when you aren't building for a profile with yourself. But I think that's an incredibly valuable challenge because it forces you, a forcing function. I need to get into the mind of this persona. I need to get into the mindset of a rideshare driver. I need to get into the mindset of a A&R person. I need to get into the mindset of a lawyer, right? Like there's just so many different people out there who are like, I'm working in this workflow and I like this workflow. But as an engineer, you're like, oh, let me like just spend some time with you and kind of figure out what's going on. And oh, I can make this like a lot better with some tools. Let me try to make some tools for you. Like that's also like a really powerful workflow when you can't directly dog food the software that you're making.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think that ability to quickly like build a dev tool and dog food it yourself, and like that immediate feedback loop, so powerful.
Yeah.
Obviously just a very different muscle to exercise than building for, as you pointed out, like building for somebody else and for another persona, which maybe looks more like the traditional like early stage founder or product, kind of product iteration motion.
Yeah.
So one of the things, and I forgot to call it out at the beginning of the show, so you wrote for the Not Another CEO Substack this week. Thank you so much. The title of your article, which was amazing, everyone should go check it out. The same as the title of the session, Founding is an Endurance Sport. And you wrote about this concept, the Founder's Carometer, which I think is awesome. And could you maybe just share for everyone like what this concept is and how you think others should use it?
Yeah. So a founder's carometer is kind of like it's a mix of like a gut check and like a little like exercise that you want to do on paper or something. And it's comprised of a couple of questions. And the first one is pretty obvious. Is like, is this a hell yes or a no? Like with Casa, I felt like this, heck yeah. Like this connected with a moment 13 years ago. It's connecting with me today. I have all the experience to work on this. Hell yeah. And then the next part is to really think about like, how much do I care about the problem? Like, is this, like, if you were to rank it from 0 to 10, like 0, don't care about it at all. It's a piece of trash on the ground. Or 10, like, I care about it, like my loved ones. That should be really high. That's a good sign on the care meter. Well, obviously not. Like, if you don't care about the problem, like as an early stage founder, you really need to just like live with that all the time. And then another part of it is scoring that problem versus the solution. And what I mean by that is, if there's a particular solution in the market that you already think is really great, you admire it, you admire the other people doing it, then that's really high. And if you have a tendency to say like, oh, this thing is really great, then if that score is less than the problem, then you're kind of out of balance. You really want to focus on, like the care meter will help you say, I really care about the problem. And the solution is something, whatever it is, like we'll get there. But you don't want to get too fixated on one solution too early, because that kind of locks you into like a mindset when you really need to be open to possibility and a lot of information, because you also don't know what you don't know about solutions that you just don't know exist yet.
So it starts with your personal excitement. Like, is it a hell yeah or is it a hell no? And I would assume you can like meditate on that, but there's got to be something. I mean, if this resonates with me, like there's just also something visceral about that. Like you can actually just feel it.
Yeah.
And then intuitively, like I think, or academically, we all know this, but then it's like, are you excited about the problem, right? Like, and the problem first and the solution second. I think this is just such a good reminder. I mean, like I when I read what you wrote, for me, there were just also times in my own journey where if I think back on it, it was like I was more excited about the solution than I was about the problem at that specific moment in time, which was probably not probably, it was not a good sign, especially within the care meter framework. But it's just such a good intuitive reminder for any founder as they're kind of navigating that early stage part of the journey.
Yeah, it's so important. And you shouldn't do it like every day. Like it's not like every day, let me check my care meter. You kind of want to give yourself some time and space because there's so much that happens.
Yeah, like how often were you checking in with your care meter? That's a great point. Was it every week, every month?
I did it every like 6 weeks or so. So every 6 weeks, I kind of had a moment of like, let's just take stock of everything that's going on. How are we with finances? How's the product going? Do I have inbound? Do I have interest? Am I getting design partners? Am I getting good research feedback? Like 6 weeks, take stock, look at your care meter. And if there's warning signs, it's like, whoa, okay, given these signs, am I going to do another 6 weeks? Like that's a really important point.
Did you have was there like something on your calendar to remind you to do that? Did you just kind of remember to do that? Any advice for forcing mechanism for checking in on your care meter for other founders?
Yeah, Nick, I'm a nerd. I'm a developer. I have a little script that I run that kind of tells me what my 6-week buckets are. But I think like a Google Calendar, just notification, it's like, hey, it's every 6 weeks, just do a check-in. I think that's totally fine too. No problems with that.
So when you wrote on the Not Another CEO Substack, you also, about the journey, you also spoke about this concept, the personal board of advisors, which I also just thought was awesome. And it was something, again, that I feel like I informally leveraged, but I didn't think about in that exact same way. So can you maybe just talk to us about that? What is that? How should a founder leverage and build a personal board of advisors?
Yeah. So I think starting out, I didn't really think about this concept until later when I had this list of like emails that I was just reaching out to people. And occasionally there was just like this little group of emails that I just always wanted to send things to be like, hey, what do you think about this? Or those were the emails that popped up on my calendar, either at kind of like regularly scheduled intervals where it was like a coffee catch up, just like, let's talk about life. Let's talk about everything. Let's hold ourselves accountable to like each other and also what we're doing. So at first, for me, it was my fiance and wife. She was a big part of my personal board of advisors, and then also a really really good friend of mine who had spent a lot of time in the early stage venture world, who was just fantastic at giving me feedback as like a mentor to a founder. If he's like, look, you're wasting your time doing this, I think this is really great, you should double down here. Those were like my first two. And the cool thing about your personal board of advisors is like sometimes there's a person who just says something to you. It can be a sentence that just changes the way you think about stuff. And that's a part of it as well. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to like continuously bug this person because they might not have time. They might be very, very busy. But recalling that feeling and the words that they said to you of like, one for me was like, your persistence will take you a long way. It's like, okay, I have to persist. Like I can't just give up on things. Yeah, so I think you can go about building your personal board by finding either close family members or very close friends that you really feel comfortable confiding like almost anything in. Because then they're going to be able to say, you're connecting with me on a very deep level. I care about you. I want the best for you. And they might even be able to kind of like see your care meter from like an external perspective. It's like, Anthony, you're getting too tired. Like you don't seem like yourself. Like what's going on? Like they know. Like, so if there's that person that you want to feel comfortable sharing that care meter with, I think that's a great way to start.
So it sounds like it's less about who they are and more about your comfort in sharing with them openly and honestly about the journey, where you are, the readings of your Carameter.
Yeah.
Does that write to you? Like, are there criteria you think we're missing here around who you should choose or think about for that?
Yeah, I think for an early stage technical founder, finding people who have a lot of subject matter expertise as well, people who can help you increase your vision.
Yeah.
That's super important. So if someone's able to say, look, I've been doing this for, 10 years in this space, they already like know so many of the pitfalls like years down the line for you. If this person's like willing to engage with you, spend time with them, put them on your board, send them your emails, get their thoughts on like where you think things are headed. And if you start to develop that trust, when they're like, whoa, you should double think about this, it's like, oh yeah, I should definitely double think about this.
Totally.
So I think
I would,
friendship is important.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure that's true for technical founders, but I would say that's true for any founder, right? I think,
Yeah.
for me, again, I didn't define in my brain that I had a personal board of advisors, but my wife was certainly on it. I have other friends that are founders and CEOs that were on it. Now my co-founder, not another CEO, David, right? Like he was definitely a member of my personal board of advisors, and so it was folks that I was willing to speak openly and candidly about it. And I think there was a mix of it's just those folks who really understood me and cared about me, and then also those people like you were just mentioning that have deep expertise in what you're doing. And I mean, maybe you could consider putting someone like that on your board, but like sometimes that's like a whole exercise too, and there's like politics that can come with that. Just having that person on your personal board is probably the most important thing.
Yeah. And there should be like some variance in there. Like you shouldn't only put like if you're a startup CTO, you shouldn't only have CTOs on your board. You should maybe have like even someone who's like a few years younger than you, who's maybe a friend and they're starting out as an engineer. And they're like, you know what? I really wish my CTO could do this or that. It's like, yeah, that's actually a pretty cool idea. Like it's really cool when almost like the mentee kind of becomes the mentor in those kinds of relationships. So I think like your personal board of advisors can grow in all kinds of really cool ways.
So you alluded to it a little, but like, so these two concepts, the Carameter, the PBA, like how did these play into your journey, right? Like, and your journey at Casa to push through hard moments, to pivot in other moments, and then ultimately like to kind of shut things down.
Yeah. The first moment was obviously at the outset. I felt an incredible amount of conviction in the idea. I cared so much about the problem. I cared a lot about the like the solution as well. But I was ready just to try a bunch of stuff. Like I was like, what can I just do research on to see what people are using? What solutions are other people using in this space? I wanted to learn about that. So really great marks across the board. The first time I started to see a change in that was when, after about 6 months of building, things weren't looking so great. Like the product didn't get traction. There was a lot of people using it, giving me some like advice and thoughts, but they're like, nope, would not use this. I want to see this, 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 and this. This is not like a legitimate platform. I'm like, oh, okay. So it's like when you kind of feel that 6-month period or 6-week period, let's see, time to go back to the drawing board. What's the care meter say? And it's like, really still care about this. That's good. Really care about this business. Want this to be a business. Still really care about the problem. Solution, I'm like, let's toss this out the window and let's take this feedback and research and build something new. And so after doing that, the care meter came up for the last time with some serious readings after going through a couple of pilot programs and getting that section of feedback. So feedback is a great thing to feed into your care meter, like external, internal as well. And at that point, some things had kind of become uncovered for me, like stuff I didn't know about, like my vision was kind of expanded. And once I was able to get insight from a couple of connections who were like, hey, did you know GitHub has a team that's working on something like this? So I was like, no, like I need to talk to those people. And sometimes just being like, all right, I need to reach out to these people and see what's going on. Like, this sounds really cool. And just being open about that. Like, even if it's like a Hail Mary email to the COO, see if it works. It worked for me. I was super lucky.
You emailed the CEO of GitHub?
I emailed the CEO of GitHub and I was like, I just need to figure this out because one of my pilot customers was like, you know, Anthony, we like using this new product. It makes sense. We can connect our docs, we can connect our code, we can connect our cloud. We get this really cool turbocharged context space where anybody can ask a question about where the product is at. But here's where we are. We're already in this place that's secure, compliant. We have hundreds of developers. We don't want to move. Can you give us this thing on GitHub? And I'm like, okay, here we go. Like, there we go. And it's good. You kind of like, you feel it. Like you might just feel it sitting there. And it's like, all right, I need to go figure out what's out there. And I'm like, I don't have that much time. I'm starting to feel some pressure. Let me start to make some of these emails, some calls, do lots of research. And eventually, when you see the thing, like if this person was they opened the door for me for some closed betas, and I was like, wow, this looks really great. And then that was a moment when I didn't even have to do the 6-week wait. I didn't have to wait for 6 weeks. I immediately felt my conviction in the problem kind of go down. It's like, oh, this solves it really well. And then my care about the solution went up. Like, I would advocate for this solution. And that was when it switched. Like, I started to care less about the problem, and I started to care more about learning about this one particular solution. And for me, that was like, this is a really cool problem. It's a really cool tool to work on. It's no longer a valuable business. And that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what's so fascinating to me about this is like the ups and downs of being a founder. It is ultimately this it is very emotional, and anyone who says it's not doesn't know what they're talking about. I mean, that's my personal opinion. And what I love about the care meter and the way you talk about using it during your journey is it is the care meter framework. It is kind of an emotional framework, but it's also like a framework which speaks to the business part of me, right? It's like it's a way to digest your emotions about what's happening and try to understand them in a more like logical business context. Which, I mean, kudos to you. Like it's much easier said than actually done.
Yeah, so true. It's a great way to blend your evidence and your emotion to see like should I still do it? Should I keep going with this? Does it make sense? Like, am I just kind of convincing myself with these emotions? Is the data conflicting with how I'm feeling? Is it aligned? But maybe I'm just still trying to convince myself. I'm trying to overthink the problem. Yeah, it was super helpful to me to take stock of all that stuff and just kind of like it gave me like a processing framework as well. So I didn't just make a gut decision on it like all the time.
Yeah. So we've been talking a lot about your journey. We've been talking about these frameworks. I think when you think more holistically about the Casa journey, are there key moments or forks in the road that you kind of go back to that you feel like determine the outcome? Uh, Places where maybe if you had gone down a different path, you think you would have ended up in a different place.
Yeah, I think that there are two. And I think one was actually at the outset of Casa. If I could have gone back, there was kind of a moment when I was like, I don't have a founder yet. That was a pretty key thing. And I really wanted to have a founder. Like I wanted to have a early team because you go faster alone, further together. Like that's a really I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think if I would have gone back and there was a moment when I'm like, you know what, do I actually go all in on this thing called Casa? Or do I just maybe start working with teams directly, like doing consulting, trying to learn about their problems very deeply before planting my flag in the sand and saying, this is the product, this is the thing. I
Yeah.
think that would have been super valuable. So that was a pivot point, I think, for me. And I obviously went the route of like, let's go with Casa.dev.
Yeah.
And then for the second part, I think it was more of a just like seeing from another founder who is a DevTools founder. I was asking for some feedback and thoughts on like how I was going with things. Like, look, I'm starting to not feel conviction anymore because of this. Like, I'm thinking about shutting down. And his point was basically like, look, some founders spend like 5 years to a decade or more working on something that is a very cool tool, but not at all a viable business. And that was when it was just like, wham, like, that's exactly what I felt. And it was just like plain as day, right in the email. I'm like, I think it's time to shut down and move on.
Yeah. I mean, the point you make about co-founders and that early team, I mean, so right. I mean, the people you surround yourself with is so important. But it's also hard, right? I mean, it's like a lot of that comes to timing, right? A lot to your personal network, whatever it is. But just that right combination of founders and then the folks around the founders matters quite a bit. But the other thing that you said, which we haven't talked about before, but which I think about a lot about in my own journey is like, was it right to have had a concept for the product like first? And I feel like that's a really hard one because I feel like what gets most founders excited is you have some light bulb moment about something that like inspires you to go. But then but if that's the world that you're in, you get in this very much in this like hypothesis driven testing approach, which is like what everyone tells you around MVP, which is like, oh, we have these hypotheses and we're going to like test is this product viable or not? But to your point, like if you just consulted with teams, right? Or you just gotten really close to teams and just been like obsessive about like, I'm obsessed with this customer and I want to understand everything about their job and what their problems are, and then look to just go solve those problems. It's a very different way, starting with the customer before the product. But I wonder if that's actually a better way to build things than the typical way that I did, and I think most founders do.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say if it truly is better or worse, but I think there's times when you should be more focused on like the actual specific product or that like kind of go to market first. Like do we want to test this specific product in the market first, or do we just want to see like what the market looks like? Like, are we, and I think for that, some of it's just like you really have it, you like have this feeling that you want to scratch, you really want to do it, like you really want to found something, you already have co-founders, like that's really important. People is like the number one thing. Like that early team is critical to doing things. And if you have a really great team and you're committed to each other and you want to learn some stuff, try it. Like there's, and if you have the runway, if you're able to do it, like go work with other customers and then try to explore what's in the market, because you might discover something that's outside of your intuition and just gut feel, which is amazing. And so I think both things can work. And yeah, I definitely think both can work.
How do you think about the role of luck? Right? Like, and it's something that I feel like I think a lot about. You hear lots of like very successful founders, the founders that we all talk about, they discuss the role of luck. Like, how do you think about the role of luck and personal agency and in startup life? And either is it reflected itself in your journey or just like in general?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is when preparation meets opportunity. And I think that really shines when you focus on what makes you valuable. So when I think about how luck factored into like Casa, one really big moment was just like we were doing a lot of traveling for our wedding while Casa was going on. Like my wife and I got married in June last year, and that was like right during like a break point for Casa. Like, okay, gonna take some time off. And some of the people that I met during that time actually ended up introducing me to people who would become pilot customers later on. And just embracing that instead of being like, oh, we have to wait. Like, I can't do this. Like, actually embrace it. It makes me unique and special. And just like be aware of that. Like, always be curious. Like, always keep that door open to maybe someone's going to say, oh, yeah, I know someone who's been talking about this all the time at this company. Do you want to talk to them? You never know when those kinds of conversations are going to happen. So you have to be open to them. And so that's when I think preparation can meet opportunity, because, and it's great for technical founders too, because you can iterate really quickly and just build things and get it back into potential users, customers' hands. When you kind of have that product ready to go, you have that idea ready to go, and you're always curious, and someone asks, boom, like you can like get on a call, like maybe it's like, in Europe at like 2 a.m. and you're trying to talk to somebody in like a totally different time zone, but it's like, just do it. That's what makes you unique and valuable. And someone's going to see that. Someone's like, oh, this person really cares. They're really trying to learn and like figure out what's going on here. So I think for me, it happened a couple of times for sure. And I'm really happy that I like leaned into, what was just happening to me. Like I can't control everything that's happening around me. And I don't want to say no to really incredible like life moments as well. So it was all about leaning into it.
Yeah, I mean, I love that philosophy, and I think, especially for founders at any stage of their journey, like you have a life too. Like life is happening, and there's a struggle. Like, how do you fit it all in? How do you make it all work? But the other side of that is like embrace it all, right, and like lean into it all, because it's a full life, and one that you can live in parallel, as you wrote about this week. And I love that perspective of embracing the opportunities that life brings you, within the context of your company and your startup as well. Like how, like in general, does founding inform your perspective on life, or vice versa, having done it a couple of times now? Like, where do you see that intersection for yourself?
Yeah, I think like for me, I guess like maybe what it means to like be a founder today. You think? I think like what it means to be a founder today is figuring out how you can really do something in the service of another, I think that's really important. And finding areas where it might be underserved, right? Like there's not a lot of people paying attention to something, but you have the skills and you can actually show up and do that. It might not be exciting at first, but again, just kind of like leaning into it, seeing what's there can really make all the difference. Because if you're able to kind of put on like that hat of like as a founder, if you want to take on investors, you're going to serve your investors, you're going to serve your employees, you're going to serve your users. It's very much like servant leadership type of stuff. That for me, like thinking about like, I'm married now. I want to be a dad soon. Like not going to be, want to be, we're planning. But it's like, if you want to do that, you're doing that in a lot of the service of others. And so I think that's a very important, like that's how it informs like my life. Like how can I do something in the service of others with the skills that I have? And sometimes you might find it in like really curious places you'd never thought of before.
Totally. Look, I think that that in service of others mindset is like it's the best way to be. And having thought about a lot of this like in depth myself, having talked to many other founders about it, like that is like the best core motivation, right? In the end, or perspective. And I think what's fraught for so many of us is that founding and the journey of founding in a lot of ways can be about more like selfish motivations, right? And I'll speak for myself personally, like I have some of that in me, right? I try to embrace the servant piece of things, but then there's also these like selfish motivations. You want money, you want power, you want fame, you want authority, whatever those things are. And so I think there's some element of that is true in each of us. But it's got to be balanced against or by your better angels, and that mindset of service to the people you care about that gives you perspective on why you do what you do, or that mindset of service to like the customer or the person, the person whose problems you're trying to solve. Like it's those things that they're going to probably keep you sane and probably have you driving your product and business in the right place as well.
So true. I'm a student of Seth Godin, and he always like says these two things. Like when you're working on a project, company, whatever, it's like who's it for and what's it for. And if you can keep that like always in the back of your mind as you do things, as long as it's like who's it for, it can't always be you. What's it for? Always money. It shouldn't always be that. Like it shouldn't always be that. It's
Yeah.
great if it leads to that. But I think coming back to one of the things I wrote about in the post, like experience is what you get when maybe you didn't get what you wanted. Maybe you didn't bring the best product to market. Maybe you didn't, do the best kind of returns for your investors. Maybe that was really bad there, or maybe something didn't quite connect with your team. The point is you have this super amazing wealth of experience you can share with other future founders, or it doesn't necessarily, they could be younger, older, whoever is going to start something new next. Being able to share that with them is such a critical point, and it's super important.
So in our last, before we wrap in our last 5-10 minutes, I have one final question for you. But before we get there, just tell us all a little bit more about yourself. Like, tell us about who you are, your background, and kind of your life leading up to your career and being a serial founder.
Yeah. So I am a Pittsburgh native. Let's go Pens. Hopefully you make the playoffs this year. But yeah, I grew up in Pittsburgh. I was never into entrepreneurship or that kind of thing as a kid. It was also never into software. I learned to code actually in university. So I went to Carnegie Mellon, and I was super intimidated because there were so many students that were exceedingly brilliant. And I was like, wow, I can do calculus, but I can't do this code stuff. What is happening? What is this? And I think that can be quite daunting for a lot of people. Like, wow, like there's already so many people who are like so much better than me. I could never do something like that. Don't say that. Just try. Like you never try. Lean into it. Maybe you lean into that fear a little bit. Maybe you realize you're really good at it. That was something that I kind of embrace. And yeah, I grew up there. I spent a bit of time at DC at Capital One, which was a great learning experience. Got to learn so much about cloud computing, and that was really where I found something that I just loved to do. I was just really into it, loved learning about it. And yeah, I also love teaching. Like, it was really great too, because when you teach, you learn twice. Like, you really have to know your material, you really have to get into it in order to be a great teacher. And so it was really great to spend some time at CMU teaching a bit as well. So, and yeah, it's I guess that's a bit about myself.
When you think about where you go next, right? When you think about 5 years from now, do you envision yourself being a founder again? Um, are you are you are you want are you Casa and done? Like where are you at? Obviously, it's all relatively fresh still, but where are you there?
Yeah, I think for me, I want to, like, my energy as a technical founder, like professionally, like that's the kind of energy I think I bring to a team. And that's not going to go away, I think, anytime soon. And so when I think about like future opportunities, I don't want to focus on founding or not. I kind of want to take all the learnings that I have and actually like practice what I'm preaching here. And I'm focusing on two things: people and the problem. And are these people I can work with for a long time? That's something that means a lot to me. And also, is this a problem that I think we can work on for a long time together? So those are the things that I'm evaluating now. And I think that if that works out, who knows what it could lead to. But I'm really excited to at some point found again. I have a super long list of ideas. I think as a founder, you should just keep like a Apple Notes, however you like to take your notes, just like list ideas, just all the time. It's like, what would if you do like what was it, the branded water, liquid death? It's like, what if you could
Liquid
do that
death.
for oat milk? It's like, write it down, like crazy
Not
branding for
that is
oat
not
milk.
a
Write it
dev
down.
tool, but is a good idea.
But I think like that's super important. So maybe maybe I'll be back in DevTools as a founder. Maybe I'll be back in founding something else. But that I'm not totally sure that's going to be the next thing. But I think focusing on people and problems is what I'm going to do.
Well, maybe that's the answer to this final question. But if you had to give yourself your future founder self one piece of advice, knowing everything you know now, what would it be?
Oh, um, always be curious.
Always be
ABC.
curious.
Always be closing. Always be curious.
Love it.
Um, I think it'll go. That curiosity will go a long way. It'll pick you up when you're feeling down, and it'll keep you grounded when you're riding really high.
Amazing. Well, I think that's a wrap. That's it for today. Anthony, thank you so much. This was fascinating. I know we had some folks watching live. Ryan Daniels. I agree with you. This guy speaks the truth. The care meter, it blows your mind. Please check out Anthony's full writings on this topic on the Not Another CEO Substack. And Anthony, I think beyond that, if folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for people to reach out?
Yeah, I think the best way to reach out is just go to my website. It's just anthonycorletti.com. There's some links there. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn or wherever, just feel free to reach out.
Amazing. Well, Anthony, thank you again. Thanks for everyone who's watched this show. And for today, that's a wrap.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.